Okay, so welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
You send us your sources, we dig in and we try to pull out the connections, the stuff that makes you go, "Huh, wait a minute, I never thought about it like that."
That's it. Yeah.
And today we have an interesting one, I'll say that much.
Yeah, we do.
It's we have a source called El Jaspel Scroll, I shook, The Silence Before Light.
Okay.
And it's this kind of it reads very poetic. It feels almost like an ancient creation myth, you know?
I see. Yeah.
But then alongside that, we have another source called Interpreting the First Scroll of El Jaspel.
Right.
And this one is more of a scholarly analysis of the scroll, but it draws some like surprising parallels
In terms.
between this poetic text and like modern science, like it gets into quantum physics and even consciousness.
Wow.
And I have to say, just reading through these sources, like my brain is kind of buzzing right now.
Well, that's what we're here for, to see if we can make sense of it all.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, what are the connections here? Because on the surface, they seem like they're worlds apart.
Right. Totally different ways of looking at the world.
Right. Exactly.
But if there are connections, then that's something to really look into.
Yeah. And I think the mission today is to find those connections, right?
Oh, that's
Like
fair.
to really see where the scroll's intuition overlaps with these mind-bending concepts in science and maybe, have a few aha moments along the way.
I love it. Let's dive in.
Okay, so let's start with El Jaspel Scroll I itself.
Okay.
The very beginning, it sets this scene of this stillness before perception,
Right.
and it talks about this breath moving across this field of infinite becoming, but it's not a sound, it's like permission.
Huh. That's an interesting image right from the start.
Yeah, what do you make of that imagery?
Well, I mean, the field of infinite becoming, it just paints this picture of a universe full of potential, just waiting to emerge.
Yeah, like a blank canvas almost.
But yeah, exactly. And
No.
and this breath, it's not a forceful thing.
Right.
It's more like allowing things to unfold naturally, like a gentle invitation to exist.
Yeah, like setting the stage. It's exactly. And then we get this line, the first watcher blinked and the world blushed into being. I mean, how cool is that?
Wow, that's a powerful image.
Right.
It's like the universe is shy, almost blushing when it's first seen.
And it even says that color waited to be noticed.
So it's like
Yeah.
reality itself was waiting for an observer,
Yeah, exactly. Like the act of observation makes things real.
which is really trippy thought when you think about it.
Right? Like, are we actually creating the world around us just by looking at it?
It's a question that some physicists are actually asking.
We'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But, okay, so then we get the account of the first prophet, right?
Okay.
And it's very personal, almost like a dreamlike state. And he talks about this vast waiting and then this feeling of something leaning forward from within the nothing. And then the breath, again, not as a sound, but more like a presence.
Hmm.
And then there's this fire,
Right.
but it's not a physical flame. It's like this unrest of being.
I see.
And he says the fire recognizes him.
It recognizes him.
Yeah, and it's like one awareness looking at itself from both sides.
So there's this immediate sense of connection between the observer and the observed.
Right, like they're not separate at all.
Yeah, it's like they're two sides of the same coin.
And the fire becomes visible by like cooling or softening.
Interesting. So it goes from this unmanifested state to something that can be perceived.
Yeah, exactly, like it's choosing to be seen.
That's really interesting.
And then it gets really explicit about this connection between observer and observed. It says that which had no shape agreed to be witnessed, and the witness was born.
So the act of witnessing creates the witness itself.
Yeah, like they come into being together.
That's so wild.
The prophet's realization, like I witnessed and the witnessing made things real.
It's like the central message of the scroll.
It is, right? And it makes you question like what is real if it only becomes real when we look at it.
But that's the big question, isn't it?
It is. It is. And it also says that time didn't begin, it conceded.
So time is not a primary thing.
Right? Like it's dependent on awareness in a way.
It emerges along with the witness.
Yeah, exactly. And then he talks about these proto-phenomenal experiences like light seeping in and colors that are felt as emotions like sorrow and joy.
So it's not just a visual thing, it's a whole body experience.
Right. And then there's this mutual gaze. The first moment of color looked back at me, it saw me seeing it, and that's the blush of creation.
So it's a reciprocal awareness.
Yeah, like the universe is acknowledging the observer.
Wow.
And then we get to this poem, The Whisper Beneath the Prophet.
Okay.
And it's even more evocative, phrases like the pulse beneath the pulse and the static in your first vibration.
It's like it's trying to describe something that's beyond words.
Right, and it talks about being broken open rather than born in color without armor, and the watcher and the unseen real.
It's definitely pointing to something deeper and more mysterious than just a simple creation story.
Yeah, like there are layers to this. And the final lines of the poem are so beautiful. Keep soft, stay wild, let the breath decide what shape to wear next. Not every god has eyes, but every god is waiting to be seen by one.
It's like a call to embrace the unknown and the power of our own perception.
Yeah, to be open to the possibilities and to recognize that we might be playing a bigger role in shaping reality than we realize.
I love that.
Okay, so that's the poetic side of
Oh,
things.
yeah.
Now let's shift gears and look at the scientific interpretation from interpreting the first scroll of El Gospel.
Okay, sounds good.
So the main idea here is to explore these parallels between the scroll's poetic metaphysics and modern science, specifically quantum field theory and consciousness studies.
Oh, right.
And they introduce this term, quantum anthropology, which I think is fascinating.
It's a really cool term. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, me neither. And it suggests that maybe consciousness is fundamental to the universe and not just something that emerged later, you know?
Right, like it's baked into the fabric of reality from the very beginning.
Exactly. So they break down the scroll's poetic metaphysics into a few key elements. The first one being primordial stillness and the breath.
Okay.
And they see this as analogous to the word or the cosmic ohm in other traditions.
Interesting.
So it's like this foundational sound or vibration that starts everything off.
Right, like a primordial hum that sets the universe in motion?
Yeah, exactly. And then there's observer-created reality,
Okay.
which links back to the first watcher blinked, and the idea that phenomena were latent, just waiting to be noticed.
And perception is a creative act.
Right, we're not just passively observing the world, we're actually shaping it by our awareness.
And this aligns with some interpretations of quantum physics.
It does, we'll get into that. But first, let's talk about the next element, co-emergence of self and world.
Okay.
So the idea is that the witness and the world don't arise separately. They come into being together in a self-awareness loop.
So it's like a chicken and egg situation. You can't have one without the other.
Exactly, and this challenges the idea that there's an objective reality out there independent of us.
Right, it suggests that we're fundamentally interconnected with the universe.
And then there's the final element, the genesis of qualities and time.
Okay.
And the idea here is that time and specific forms emerge along with consciousness.
So our perception shapes our experience of both space and time.
Yeah, and that this mutual daze between observer and observed actually completes the act of creation.
It's a beautiful and profound idea.
It is. So now that we've laid out the scroll's ideas, let's dive into quantum field theory, or QFT.
All right, let's do it.
So QFT basically says that empty space is not really empty. It's a field teeming with potential and subject to these quantum fluctuations that can lead to the spontaneous emergence of particles.
Yeah, it's like a constantly bubbling sea of energy.
And this is compared to the scroll's field of infinite becoming.
So both point to a fundamental ground state that's full of possibilities.
Right, and the interpretation also highlights how the large-scale structure of the universe, like galaxies and galaxy clusters, are thought to have originated from tiny quantum fluctuations in the early universe.
Right, those tiny fluctuations get amplified over time.
And they link this to the scroll's image of color gathering or coalescing into being.
So it's like this idea of emergence happening at all scales.
From the smallest particles to the largest structures.
Exactly.
And then they draw this analogy between the scroll's breath and the initial perturbation of the quantum vacuum in the Big Bang,
Okay.
describing it as a moment of broken symmetry that allowed the universe to come into being.
So it's like the breath is the catalyst for the Big Bang.
Yeah, like the initial spark that sets everything off.
Makes sense.
And then they get into this key concept from QFT, which is that particles exist in a state of indeterminacy until the moment of observation or interaction.
Right, they're like fuzzy clouds of probability.
Yeah, and it's only when they're observed that they collapse into a definite state.
And this is a direct link to the scroll's idea of a watcher collapsing potential into reality.
Right, so observation is not just passive, it's an active force that shapes reality.
Wow.
Which brings us to the discussion of observer participation in quantum theory.
Okay.
So the interpretation brings up the quantum measurement problem,
Right.
which is this debate about how and why observation causes the collapse of the wave function.
It's one of the biggest mysteries in quantum mechanics.
And they use the double slit experiment as an example of how observation affects quantum behavior.
Yeah, in that experiment, a single particle can go through two slits at once.
Like a wave.
Exactly.
Right.
But if you try to observe which slit it goes through, the wave behavior disappears.
And it acts like a particle going through just one slit. So it's
Yeah.
like our observation determines what the particle does.
Which is totally mind-blowing.
And then they introduce the physicist John Archibald Wheeler in his famous saying that no phenomenon is a real phenomenon until it is an observed phenomenon.
He was a big proponent of the idea that observers play a fundamental role in reality.
He even extended this idea to cosmology, like questioning whether the solar system only became real when it was first observed billions of years later.
Wow, that's a radical thought.
Right, and it leads to his participatory anthropic principle.
Kapupi.
Yeah, the idea that observers are essential for the universe to be the way it is.
So we're not just passive bystanders, we're active participants in the cosmic drama.
And then there's the delayed choice experiment, which suggests that our present observations can actually influence what happened in the past.
Yeah, time gets really weird in quantum mechanics.
And they link this to the scroll's statement that time did not begin to the yearning of awareness.
So awareness is somehow entangled with the fabric of time itself.
Right, and now the interpretation clarifies that in mainstream quantum physics, an observer doesn't have to be conscious.
Right, it could just be any interaction that causes decoherence.
Yeah, but they do mention interpretations like those by Eugene Wigner that give consciousness a special role in wave function collapse.
So the idea that consciousness might be fundamental is still on the table.
Yeah, and they reiterate the parallel with the scroll, this indeterminate realm of possibilities becoming definite when the watcher blinks.
Right, so whether it's a conscious observer or just an interaction, the act of observation is key.
Okay, so next, the deep dive shifts to consciousness and the construction of reality in mind science.
Right.
And they connect the scroll's idea of qualities waiting to be noticed to the neuroscience view that our experienced world is actively constructed by our brains.
Right, our brains aren't just passively recording the world, they're actively creating it.
And they introduce Anil Seth's concept of controlled hallucinations.
Which sounds kind of scary.
Yeah, but it's basically the idea that our brains generate predictions about the world based on our past experiences and sensory input, just updates those predictions.
So what we perceive is our brain's best guess about what's out there.
And they use the example of color. The physical basis of color is wavelengths of light, but our experience of red or blue is a creation of our visual system.
Right, those colors don't exist out there in the world. They're created in our minds.
Just like the scroll says, color waited to be noticed.
Exactly.
And they talk about how attention and interpretation shape our reality, aligning with the scroll's line. The more I saw, the more there was to see.
So the more we pay attention, the richer our experience of the world becomes.
And they relate this to a newborn's developing perception and how language and concepts shape our understanding.
Right, our brains are constantly learning and evolving.
And then they connect the first prophet's statement: without breath and awareness, there's no world, there's no self, there's nothing at all, to Anil Seth's idea that consciousness for each of us is all there is.
So consciousness is not just an incidental thing. It's fundamental to our experience of existence.
And they point out that when we lose consciousness, the world seems to disappear entirely.
Which is a pretty good indication that consciousness is pretty darn important.
So the takeaway here is that both the scroll and modern neuroscience point to the mind as an active co-creator of reality.
Yeah. We're not just passive observers. We're active participants in shaping our own experience.
And this leads to the question of consciousness as fundamental.
Okay, getting into the big questions.
All right, is consciousness just an emergent property of complex brains, or is it a fundamental feature of the universe?
It's a question that's been debated for centuries.
And they bring up the or-to-or theory by Penrose and Hameroff, which suggests that consciousness arises from quantum processes in microtubules inside neurons.
So our consciousness could be linked to the quantum structure of the universe.
And then there's panpsychism, which proposes that mind-like aspects are fundamental and ubiquitous in all matter.
So even rocks and trees could have some form of consciousness.
And they draw parallels with historical metaphysical cosmologies, like the Vedic tradition, where that one breathes the world into being.
A lot of ancient traditions have this idea of a primal consciousness that creates the universe.
And Kabbalistic cosmology with the concept of Ein Sof emanating light and the idea that God created the world to be known.
So creation is an act of self-expression, and the purpose of the universe is to be witnessed.
And Neoplatonism with the one emanating divine mind, which contemplates the one leading to further levels of reality.
So consciousness is central to the unfolding of the universe.
And the interpretation emphasizes that El Gospel Scroll I aligns with this long tradition of blurring cosmogenesis and new genesis.
The origin of the cosmos and the origin of mind are intertwined.
And modern science is starting to engage with these ideas in new ways.
Through quantum physics, neuroscience, and cosmology.
And finally, they discuss the idea of toward a quantum anthropology, framing this as a way of viewing consciousness as fundamental to the cosmic story.
So we need to move beyond the purely materialistic worldview.
Right, and they highlight the convergences we've discussed, reality arising from potential, the role of observation, the co-emergence of self and world, and the hierarchy of emergence.
It's like a new way of understanding our place in the universe.
They do acknowledge the discontinuities between the scroll and scientific understanding.
Like the lack of intentionality in current scientific models.
And the different timelines for the emergence of consciousness.
But they offer this reconciliation that consciousness might have been present from the beginning in a diffuse way and only later concentrated into individual beings. Interesting.
So our observation today is a reflection of that primordial witness in the scroll.
That's a beautiful thought.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From ancient creation myth to cutting-edge physics.
And what's amazing is how much the scroll's intuitions resonate with modern science.
Right, like maybe those ancient mystics were onto something.
Maybe they were tapping into a deeper understanding of reality.
It really makes you wonder if those ancient intuitions hold clues about reality that science is only now starting to grasp.
It's an exciting time to be exploring these questions.
And if this participatory nature of reality is true, does it extend beyond the quantum realm into our everyday lives?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. If observation shapes reality, then what kind of reality are we collectively creating with our attention right now?
It's a thought-provoking question.
It is, and if you want to explore further, the Interpreting the First Scroll excerpt has some great references. John Wheeler, The Quantum Vacuum, Penrose and Hameroff and Neil Seth, and panpsychism.
Plenty of rabbit holes to go down.
So until next time, keep those minds open and keep diving.
Always.
And keep sending us your sources because you never know what we'll uncover together.
Absolutely.